you realize your neighbor was actually insane? I discovered my prize-winning heirloom tomatoes had been cut from the vine, and my hands literally shook as I touched the clean cuts, not torn like an animal would do, but sliced with pruning shears. Someone had stolen from my dead grandmother's garden. I inherited this house 6 months ago after she passed and gave up a promotion to move here from across the state because I couldn't let her legacy die. These weren't just plants. That rose bush came from her wedding bouquet 50 years ago. Those tomato seeds had been passed down 4 generations. The herb garden supplied every Sunday dinner I could remember. I'd even placed a memorial stone by her favorite bench where she used to sit and whisper to her plants. I still did that too, wearing her old gardening gloves that smelled like her hand lotion. Working night shifts as a nursemaid, I tended the garden at dawn as my meditation and grief processing. The only new thing on our street was Susan, who'd recently married Robert next door. Robert had lived there forever and was HOA president, but seemed decent enough the few times we talked. I hadn't met his new wife yet. Through my kitchen window, I saw a woman on their porch talking on her phone and gesturing at my garden. 2 mornings later, I caught her red-handed with a basket full of my vegetables. She smiled and said she was helping me harvest since the garden looked overwhelming for one person. She claimed Robert told her it was community space for the whole street. My grandmother had been generous, but this felt wrong. I swallowed my anger and offered to teach her to grow her own garden, and even gave her one of my heirloom tomato seedlings in one of my grandmother's hand-painted pots. She cooed about how sweet I was while making comments about the overgrown mess. The next morning, I was watering when the garbage truck rumbled down our street. I watched in horror as my gifted plant, still in grandmother's ceramic pot, got tossed from Susan's bin into the truck. The pot shattered in the crusher. That deliberate disrespect turned my hurt to anger. My security camera started catching her taking vegetables every dawn while I worked. She complained to neighbors about my garden attracting pests. Robert was always conveniently at work during her activities. After 2 weeks of theft, I installed a small fence with a polite private garden sign. I came home to find it torn down with Susan claiming it was on her property. She'd filed an HOA complaint about my eyesore garden. Then I found my grandmother's memorial stone hidden behind the shed. During our confrontation, she let something slip that explained everything. She said Robert wouldn't shut up about my grandmother's perfect garden when they were dating. She saw my garden as competition for his admiration. Yet I'd seen her hosting garden parties taking credit for growing everything herself. She hated what it represented but craved the status it brought. The HOA violations kept coming, obviously influenced by Susan's pillow talk with Robert. Neighbors started avoiding me, not wanting to anger the HOA president's wife. I researched property lines and found the old survey markers proving the garden was mine. I documented everything and installed more cameras. When I caught her on video salting the ground near grandmother's rosebush, I confronted her with the evidence and threatened to call the police. She apologized with fake tears and promised to stop. 2 weeks of peace passed and I started to relax. My friends convinced me I needed a vacation after all the stress. I hesitated to leave the garden, but neighbors promised to water everything, and Susan had been avoiding me, completely staying inside whenever I was outside. Maybe she'd finally learned her lesson. I spent 2 weeks at the beach posting happy photos and finally feeling human again. The salt air and distance gave me perspective. I returned home tanned and refreshed, ready to embrace my grandmother's garden with new energy, but something felt off as I walked up the path. Strange shoots poked up along our shared fence line. My heart sank as I recognized the distinctive segmented stalks. Bamboo. Running bamboo, to be specific. The most invasive species you could legally plant. In just 2 weeks, it had already grown 3 feet tall, and the underground runners were heading straight for my garden. That witch had waited until I left to plant her revenge. I stood there staring at the bamboo forest she'd started knowing it could destroy everything within months. The roots would strangle my grandmother's roses and crack the foundation of her greenhouse. This wasn't just petty theft anymore. This was botanical warfare. I pulled out my phone and started Googling the most aggressive plants legal to grow because if she wanted to play dirty, I was done being the nice guy with the dead grandmother's garden. Full story on channel, linked below.